This is The Meaningful Way. I'm your host, Luke Iorio. Now, as you might expect, stress is no laughing matter. However, laughter played a very interesting role in our guest today becoming a highly trained stress and trauma expert. We dive into an array of topics on this show, and yet there are some that seem to come back to us more often than not. And today, we're going to talk about stress, but we're going to talk about stress and how to make it work for you, not against you, with the help of our guest, Dr. Nancy Irwin. Dr. Nancy has traveled quite an unusual road over the course of her career, as I just alluded to, because not only is she a trained therapist and clinical hypnotist, Dr. Nancy has a unique connection as an opera singer who then also has been from Atlanta to New York to become a stand-up comedian. And I'm expecting certainly a fun interview today, but we're going to hear a bit about that journey because it doesn't end there. You see, once she made it out to LA, what captured Dr. Nancy's attention was not the entertainment field. It was her experience volunteering for Children of the Night, a shelter for sexually abused teens. And it absolutely changed her life and prompted her to return to school at the age of 44 to get her doctorate in psychology. She then wrote a book to inspire others to know that it is never too late to reinvent yourself. That first book being U-Turn, as in Y-O-U, U-Turn, Changing Direction to Midlife. She has also co-authored Breaking Thru, Stories of Hope and Recovery, sharing the stories of people recovering from addiction. Dr. Nancy's had extensive training in a variety of approaches to help people heal from traumatic stress and sexual abuse. Dr. Nancy's a sought-after public speaker, frequent media guest, appearing on shows such as Anderson Cooper, The Doctors, and much more. And with that, Dr. Nancy, I am grateful to have you on The Meaningful Way.
A pleasure, Luke. Thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. So I sort of alluded to this, obviously, in the opening, and I love talking to individuals such as yourself who have just lived a full life, and you've had a bit of adventure throughout the course of your life. And so for you, one of the things that's been amazing is that you've adventured and tried new avenues and pivoted even a bit later in life to what you found is just this extraordinary path. But to get there, you traveled through comedy and opera to become a psychologist, to become a therapist. And I'm just curious, that's not a well-worn path. So what was it that how did you do that? What was comedy? What was the opera? And then how did that ultimately come about to bringing you to where you are today?
Well, I always say the road from comedy to mental health is very short indeed. So that explains that track. But yeah, I was raised in Atlanta, and I'm a good singer. I have an operatic voice, but I wasn't good enough for big time. And I didn't want to just teach. And there were other gifts I discovered that I had on stage besides just singing opera. I had a flair for comedy, and some people just sort of dared me to try stand-up. And I'm like, I could see me doing that. So I was idiotic enough to try it one night, and I did very well, fortunately or unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so I really got the bug. I went to New York, and I did that for 10 years. I had a modicum of success, and came out to LA in 1994. I'd been in New York for 10 years. Came out to Hollywood in 94 because I heard Hollywood needed more blondes. And did okay there too. I opened and worked along the sides of people. I don't know if you've ever heard of these guys, Ray Romano, Jerry Seinfeld. Nobody big.
No, not at all.
And it's a lot of fun. But when you're a comic, you only work about 30 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. So I was bored. I had a lot of time on my hands. And I started volunteering, as you mentioned in the intro, for this wonderful shelter called Children of the Night for sexually abused teens, sex trafficked kids. It waked up the healer in me, and it was a real OMG moment. Yeah. It was unbelievable because when you're a comic, at least for me, it's very narcissistic. It's all about, how's my hair? Who's in the crowd to see me tonight? You're only as good as your last set or your last joke. And with these kids, it just opened up a whole world. It was like, this is real life. Yeah. These kids were strung out. They were suicidal. They were pregnant by their pimps or whoever knows who. And there was just something in their faces. It just waked me up. And I'm like, there's something else I'm meant to do. So over the course of a few weeks, I'd do the clubs at night with the kids by day. And it just was very clear. It was painless. And I always tell people when they want to reinvent, when they want to leave one career that they really like and are maybe afraid to leave it, when it's your time, it really won't hurt. It didn't for me. It was very natural. I couldn't wait to get back to school and start studying specifically trauma to help heal people like these kids and others. I just sort of fell in love with trauma, if you will. And I do want people to know that there's a transferable skill in everything. So I get to use my comedy, using it right now, hopefully. Yep. And at all the media appearances, when it's appropriate, of course. Yeah. And in the clinic one-on-one, I certainly do, because comedy is a wonderful healing mechanism, again, when it's used appropriately. So whatever you're doing, if you're not happy with your life, make a list of all the things that you do like about it, and then figure out a way that can transfer into something else, because I promise you there are many ways you can connect the dots.
I like that. I want to come back to that idea of the transferable skills in just a second. I was just curious, what was it that drew you to even volunteer at Children of the Night, to lean towards trauma? Because that's when most people think of volunteering, they think of any number of things that they can do, but that's, that you're walking into something pretty serious when you volunteer for an organization like that. So I'm curious what drew you into that, and I guess maybe what were maybe just even one or two of the experiences that you had there that showed you the way in which you could help other people heal.
Great questions. I actually was taking a self-improvement course at the time, and they were so brilliant. They encouraged us to take our day job, which for me, of course, was comedy at the time, and match it up with a cause that you care about in the community, feeding the homeless, reading the blind, whatever. And so I started researching volunteer opportunities in my area. First of all, I loved the name Children of the Night. Of all, I guess I wasn't really super aware of it at the time. It was coming into my consciousness, but I was molested as a teenager myself. So something about those kids of course, it was very enlightening to me and helped me heal my own stuff, even though their cases were much more dramatic, not to minimize my own, but much more dramatic and serious. So it was twofold, because whatever we volunteer for in the community, we always take much more than we give.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were working then, even just at those moments with those children, what was it that showed you the way towards therapy? Because I'm sure there's a couple different ways that ultimately you could help organizations and help individuals that are going through the type of trauma that they've been through, but you very much said therapy is the way that you want to be able to heal, the way you want to be able to contribute. And I'm curious what led you down that path to figure out this is the profession for you.
Great question. I wasn't even sure I wanted to be a therapist.
Okay.
I just knew, and I tell you, it was a little girl that I met. Of course, I can't say her name. I can still see those huge brown eyes. She was exceptionally young. They usually treat adolescents. She was 11 years old. And since the age of, I think, 9, she had been pimped out by her mother, who lived on the streets with a severe, I think it was a crack addiction. And she would turn her daughter out to go service men and bring back enough money to get high. And if the girl did not deliver, she would take her cigarettes and extinguish them on the little girl's arms and legs. She was this precious little girl. I got tears in my eyes talking about it now. It's been ages since I thought about her. Let's call her Susie. Sure. She had these enormous brown eyes, skinny little thing, and you could still see those burns on her arms and legs, but her eyes were filled with such hope. She was so thrilled that I was there to work with her. She had this natural sweetness. And when she talked about her mother, who I've just described was, severely disordered and disabled and addicted, this little girl still wanted nothing more than to be with her mother. She spoke with her mother with such love. And in that moment, something opened up. It was like this tectonic shift. And I was like, oh my God, there's something elevating I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to move up to another level in my life. But I was so fascinated by the dynamic of how this child had been through everything she had and still had this cord with her mother. It absolutely fascinated me. It still does. How resilient we can all be through trauma. So I didn't know if I was going to become a social worker and work there at Children of the Night. That's initially what I thought. But here's the deal, and I encourage people to do this. When I was just called to study psychology and trauma specifically. And something in me just said, just answer the phone, follow that call, trust that the answer will be revealed to you along the way. And it was. One thing led to another. I discovered hypnosis in the course of studying, which theretofore I thought was this silly, comedy club trick because I'd seen it there all the time, and I just thought it was this crazy thing, And then when you study it therapeutically, it was like, oh my God, this is really a much briefer therapy for a lot of issues, a lot of behavioral issues. And that was a gift that just came because I started walking that journey.
It's amazing. It's probably one of the things that certainly we don't think of very often when we think of helping those that have been through trauma, is what we get to witness in terms of the resiliency of the human spirit, and what that does in terms of even feeding us with what we're trying to do to help them, and then the way in which that can be used as an example with other individuals, and the extraordinary example that sets, an inspiration it gives to others.
Absolutely. I'm just fascinated with the survivability of the human spirit.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Endlessly fascinating to me. Yeah.
And it's I guess maybe that's part of in a very, very different way, but I think it's one of the things also that's interesting, because I wanted to ask you about how you face that call. There's a lot of us that are out there. I know a lot of people that listen to this call. It's called them, this is the meaningful way. And so there's something that's stirring, there's something that's calling them, and yet there is that boldness to be able to answer and to be able to step forward. And I think a few things. One, very practical, look at the transferable skills that you already mentioned. But I really appreciate, and I guess maybe if you could go a little further into this, you didn't assume that it meant you had to completely alter everything. It was that you were going to answer the call, you were going to do some studying, you were going to do some exploring, and see where that went. And it opened you up to something just so much bigger. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about being in that journey, almost what I'd call the space in between, right? Knowing where we are versus not even knowing where we're ultimately going to be. And we're somewhere in between. And usually that's riddled with uncertainty. What's that journey like? How do you navigate through it?
Well, perhaps a lot of this is my stage training. I learned to be able to spin on a dime and expect the unexpected and just run with it. So many times you don't have enough time to pause and think, you just react. So it was really a gift that I got to pause. It took me 5 years to study. I got a day job, and fortunately I was working for a very successful executive who gave me the freedom, and I got to take time off, go do speeches, study, go to class, etc. And little did I know, all the time that I was working for him, he was a master at sales and marketing. So when I completed and set up my private practice, it was like I had been waxing on, waxing off the whole time. All of a sudden I had these skills. I knew how to build a private practice because I had unconsciously just learned it from him. So sometimes it's a surprise gift. So I just tell people, even if you're doing something, if you're waiting tables while you're in college, I was working as an executive assistant. I remember close to the end, I was like, how dare he ask me to pour his coffee? I've almost finished my doctorate in psychology. This is beneath me. And then another part of me, the bigger part of me, just said, just do it. There's something to learn. And so you got to be patient and just trust that you're on your path for a reason.
Yeah. That's interesting because it really is. It's helping everybody take a look at, no matter where you are, whatever the situation is, whatever you're doing right now as a job or what have you. It's almost that question of what are you really practicing at this moment? And you were practicing learning in a very, very different way for where it would ultimately go. And so many different elements of your career have afforded you the chance to do that. I guess maybe if we switch over, because obviously, a major part of your expertise is around this stress management and stress resiliency through everything that you do. And I guess if you could talk a little bit about, because it's almost, and I think it's some of the research that seems to be coming to light more recently, is almost that stress kind of has gotten a bad rap. Meaning that stress actually can serve us in a number of different ways. And I was wondering if you could begin maybe a little bit there of maybe debunk a little bit of the myth and some of the misunderstandings of stress, and differentiate between what is the stress that actually is bad for you versus how this can be of great service to us in our lives.
Absolutely. You're right. Stress does have a bad rap. And actually, if you look at the real definition, The word stress simply means emphasis, significance. So when you stress a point, you're trying to impart importance of it to someone. So when you feel stressed, you want to be very careful about what is too overwhelming. There's a difference between stress and anxiety, what's overwhelming. In fact, there's a great country song by Daryl Worley. Maybe people know this big honkin' country hit. Sounds like life to me. Ain't no fantasy. It's just a common case of everyday reality. Man, I know it's tough, but you got to suck it up. To hear you talk, you're all caught up in some tragedy. Sounds like life to me. So you want to look at what's causing you the stress. Maybe your kids are driving you crazy. Think back to the day when you were dying to have those kids. Think about all the people who want to have kids and are not able to for varying reasons. You chose to have these kids. They're a gift. Yeah, they can drive you crazy, but they're way more of a blessing than a curse. So you chose to have children. They are of significance in your life. You took that on. Same thing with a job. Look at all the people who don't have a job. They'd love to be in your shoes and have a deadline to meet or a difficult boss to work for. So we have to remind ourselves of things. I'm not demeaning the frustration that comes with it, but a little perspective, coated with a lot of gratitude, and it can encourage you to believe you have what it takes to get through this.
You know, it's interesting because a couple of things that, one, you just mentioned in terms of that gratitude, and part of what that gratitude does is it brings us to almost a more macro level perspective, right? So it sounds like when we're caught in some of that anxiety, it's because it's the not seeing the forest from the trees, right? We're stuck down in the weeds at that moment, and part of that gratitude begins to widen our lens again so that we can remind ourselves of exactly where does this fit in the bigger picture of what's going on. And I love the reminder, because that certainly comes up a lot on the show, is that reminder of we are making choices. We're making choices about, what led us to here, whether it's having kids or the job that we have chosen and choosing to stay within that job and not look elsewhere or what have you. It is a reminder of the choice you're making right now, even if you may want to make a different choice tomorrow.
Exactly.
Excellent. So and what are some of the ways then maybe that we can really begin to leverage stress? Meaning, how is it that we can use stress as something that propels us in our lives?
Again, you want to look at the choices you've made and how meaningful are they. I work at, a luxury rehab facility in Malibu. So we have critical people coming in all the time. They're detoxing. Some have been suicidal. They've OD'd. They're coming to us. Their family members are freaking out. Their kids, they've been fired. They have DUIs. A little bit of stress. Some days are extremely overwhelming. What helps me compartmentalize and focus on the significance of the stress and helping that person versus feeling overwhelmed is a reminder of my mission. What am I dedicated to? What am I committed to? My mission is to help people heal. I'm committed to watching them grow to attain their goals. And when you're aware of your mission, patience will come to you. And patience, that's CE, not TS. Hopefully I have both. But all the patience that you need when you're focused on what gives you meaning and fulfillment in life, whatever your job is, then just trust that you're given what you can handle for the greater good to help these people. So I don't look at it as stress when I'm talking to an angry mother. He's been in rehab 3 times. What are you doing for him? Why hasn't he healed yet? Why is he relapsing? It allows me to figure out, to dig deeper, to crawl behind the symptom of addiction and see what's driving him to use and check out. Mm-hmm. There's always a reason. So when you focus on the why, the how is very apparent.
It's interesting. Because what I've actually now in my mind and what I'm relating it to, I've heard 2 different distinctions in there in terms of stress. The first we were talking about a moment ago in terms of maybe not the not seeing the forest from the trees is almost a bit of that mental stress, right? So it's we don't have the clarity, we don't have the certainty, we don't see the picture of what's going on. And then to me, what you just described, which is what really broadens the lens of things, is that when you're connected to your mission, to your meaning, to your purpose, the why of what's there, that to me is that spiritual level. It's at that purpose, that meaning level. And so it's a whole different level of, I know what this is for. I know what the importance is. And you're using that to investigate. And I love that question of a curious why, right? Not an accusatory why. It's that curious why that sounds like it guides your process.
Absolutely.
So take that a little bit further. For those that maybe they're going through some phase of what I would describe, I think is all too common, burnout within their lives right now. So whether it's burnout in career, burnout in relationships, even burnout with maybe trying to get their health on track, whatever it is that they feel like they're struggling with and they're up against it, where do they go from that? So to take them maybe a little deeper into the understanding of the why, and then how does that get to the how so that they can make some changes for themselves?
First of all, it's being responsible for how you got there, not to blame or shame, but how did you take on these extra 50 pounds you don't want? How did you go on so long in a job that's not fulfilling for you? How have you stayed in a relationship that just wasn't working for either of you? Again, not to blame, but to be responsible and go, why didn't I listen to or how could I be more in tune with my own intuition and listening to my inner voice? I knew 10 years ago this was not for me. Why did I ignore that? Again, not to blame, but so you can learn and take that into the next phase of your life. So you are able to listen to your intuition, that inner voice. It's always there. Most of us allow the fear to cover it up because we're so focused on the practical. And I know that's easy to fall into that trap. But you do want to try to factor in a time, especially if you're considering making a change. A lot of people don't know what's missing. They just feel so overwhelmed. Maybe a lot of things are missing. They're not fulfilled in their relationship or their job, or their kids' relationship is a train wreck and their health is horrible. So they feel very overwhelmed with all of this, and it's just so muddy. They feel like swirled in this eddy. You want to factor in time every day to go within and listen to that small, quiet voice and love yourself. Love your flaws. If you hate the fat, the boss, the kids, the whatever it is, that energy is going to take you nowhere. It's just going to swirl you down more. So give yourself a break, forgive, but again, be responsible for, there was this voice going off and I chose not to listen to it. You were probably afraid or just untrained how to do that. So take some time and listen and take one small step forward to one change you can make. Maybe it's starting to just take a walk after dinner to begin to lose the weight. If you can't afford a trainer or a gym or health food or whatever it is, but we all know what to do to make the changes.
You know, there's this almost. I don't want to lose that because I think really a key point there is we know really what to do. We know a lot of the steps, and if we don't, we can get that information, pretty well, thanks to Google and YouTube and everything, and a whole lot of books and everything else out there. I think what you very subtly, though, are alluding to is almost that very compassionate look at why you might be ready now, as opposed to why you might not have been ready previously, and how you begin to listen to that inner voice to elicit that, to begin to better understand that. And I know that this idea, obviously, of a daily practice, whether that be meditation or praying or journaling or whatever it's mindful walks, whatever it's going to be, that allows deeper in and listen deeper to really what's going on. And I also love that thought of what might be missing, because I know how much, I think back to Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication of, people thinking about what is the real need that I'm trying to express here. And when we can get to that level, we begin to understand so much more of why and how things are actually unfolding the way that they are.
Because there's a positive intent behind every bit of human behavior. No one chooses to be an alcoholic or a drug addict or to beat their wife or to be morbidly obese. No one chooses that consciously. There's a deeper need underneath it. They've been trying to escape pain, to mask a trauma, to thwart unwanted sexual attention, something like that. So what we do in the clinic is we find out what the underlying need is, and then the symptom falls away. Yeah. So you're not harming yourself or others, as the case may be. And a lot of people go, you're crazy. But I always say, even serial killers, I'm not endorsing them, but underneath their distorted thinking, they're trying to feel powerful, make a statement, right some wrong, something like that. To be in control again, there's always a positive intent. So you want to listen to what you need. What is your intent? And then find a healthy way to get it, rather than in 6 pizzas or a 6-pack or whatever your addictive behavior is.
I absolutely love that insight and that reminder that there is always a positive intent to everything that we do. It may not be executed in a healthy manner, but the intent, the positive intent is there. And when you uncover the real need, you can then come back to, okay, so what's the healthy way of me meeting this need? I absolutely love that. The other, and I guess maybe just to build this in, because I know then part of this and part of your work is also with athletes and performers around resiliency. And that, I think, factors in here as well, because once we even start to uncover this and uncover our path, maybe uncover the healthier ways that we want to live and the more meaningful ways that we want to live within our lives, we know there's just this constant bombardment of distraction and stress and everything just waiting to try to take us off track again. So resiliency is another key piece of this journey. So I was wondering if you could share a bit about, for instance, these athletes that at times are under incredible stress to be able to perform right when they need to, right in the moment. And what is it that they know and practice that's different, perhaps, than how most of us orient ourselves towards our lives and stress?
Well, we get whatever we focus on. And whatever we focus on expands. In psychology, we call this actualizing something. If you focus on getting on the road and having a wreck, you will. If you focus on, let's say, an NBA player is focusing on, oh my God, don't blow this free throw, they will blow it. You want to really manage your languaging, because language turns into pictures, and pictures turn into behavior. Because when you think about it, words don't even exist. Language is a social construct. Human beings made up languages, millions of them since caveman, and every word in every language represents some sort of picture. So most people listening know, if they have kids, you can't tell a little kid, don't put those beans up your nose, because what are they going to do? You want to say, keep the beans on the plate or eat them. That's it. Don't run out in the street. They will. Here's the boundary. Stay in the yard. Only go out in the street when you're holding mommy or daddy's hands. Mm-hmm. Clear pictures that they can see and that they will respond to. When a teacher yells at a kid, you're always late, they will be. This creates a pattern. It can be a lifelong pattern of procrastination, because the kid has been labeled, I'm a late Nick. I get attention as negative attention, but I stand out. Words are incredibly powerful. So you want to start speaking very lovingly to yourself in a positive way, calling yourself to your goals. I know I got off track from the athletes, but it's the same thing. Yeah. Good coaches know this. And they always encourage them, instead of don't hold your knees like that, stand like this. You have just the right tension in your wrist. Swish that ball through the net. Do they every time? Well, of course not. But they perform way better when they focus on the image they do want. And then they show up and train every day. So it's always focusing. And I heard a great interview with Sandy Koufax a couple of years ago. Oh my gosh, naturally gifted. And here's the deal. A lot of athletes, from the time they were 4 years old, they were told how gifted they were. If they rely on that, they're going to be, their career is going to be dead in the water in a short time. No one can operate off natural talent for very long. It always gives out, because there's always going to be somebody better. And the effort and the focus is much more important than natural talent. I mean, you have to have both. Come on. For athletes, you have to have both. But the latter is much more important than the first, because there's a lot of people whose passion and hard work has taken them farther than the natural prowess of an athlete.
Absolutely. It's amazing, because I know that at different times, and I've seen this even within my own life, let alone just the conversations I've had with guests, of we know that idea of you need to picture what it is you want. And yet, when we look at our language and we look at how we're describing things on a daily basis, we're constantly reinforcing the things we don't want. And so for us to be very, very conscious of, the way, again, you described this was that, to me, it's those words become labels, the labels become identity, or they become actualized. And so it's to be very, very conscious of that and to remind ourselves of what is that image that I'm painting for myself over and over and over again. So I guess before we completely wrap up, what might be just even one or two practices that our listeners can take on that'll help them build that resiliency on a day-to-day, week-to-week type of basis?
Well, I think it's great to write out your goals. Maybe it's for the month or the week. Maybe it's for the year, 5 years, whatever it is. I encourage couples to do the same thing before they get married or living together, whatever the deal is. I say, what kind of mate do you want to be? What kind of mate do you want to have? What kind of relationship do you want to have? It's like when you build a house. If you just say, we want a nice house. Well, if you don't have a clear vision of it, what are you going to get? And then what do you want the values to be as a foundation to support that? What are your goals? Do you want to own a home? How much money do you want? What about sex? What about lifestyle practices? Where? Who's going to make more money? Do you want to have kids? All of these things, those are long-term goals, of course. But if you can't talk about these things, you might not be ready for the relationship.
Absolutely. So then, Dr. Nancy, I guess maybe just given the experience of your own journey, obviously all of the incredible work that you've been doing for years, I'm curious for you at this point, what is it that you would consider to be your meaningful way? Meaning, what is it that matters most to you, and how does that affect the way that you live and work at this point in your career?
Great question. What matters most to me is just living in the moment and trusting and continuing. Really, I'm very fulfilled. My life goals at this point are to travel more. I'm at a time where my husband loves to travel too, so we can afford the time and to go places that are feeding our spirit, places where we can learn more about other cultures and really grow and simply be. That may sound like not much of a goal, but I really have a lot of meaning and joy in my life, and it's just continuing to connect. I love watching people grow. That is my addiction. I love when people here and they have a realistic goal and they're stuck, and together we get them unstuck. We get them out of the struggle gear and into moving forward, because there is a way for everyone, and it's such an honor to be on that path with people.
Dr. Nancy, I want to thank you for being on The Meaningful Way, sharing all that you have, both your wisdom as well as some of your stories with us. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Luke. I just want to see everybody have a life that they love.
Absolutely. For everybody listening in, I guess maybe the couple things that I want to leave you with is that reminder to simply be. Because when we are present in our lives, when we get to really sink into the connection of the moment, the experience of the moment, we get to simply be, and everything else fades away. That's where you're going to find the joy that'll enrich and fuel all aspects of your life and career. And so, as always, I want to thank you for being here. And until next time, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for tuning in to The Meaningful Way. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and please subscribe and follow along with all these great guests, their stories, and interviews. Also, it helps us a lot if you not only share some of your favorite episodes online, but also provide us feedback. Go into iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app happens to be, and rate the show. Provide us some feedback and let us know how it is that we're doing. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, whether it be with the IPEC Coach Training School, the Live, Lead, Play Network, or even just what's evolving with The Meaningful Way, go on and head on over to lukeiorio.com.